So welcome to the Pop-Up Literary Festival. I'm joined with author Heather Childs, sorry, no S. This grammatically thing, let's just start that again. Hello and welcome to the Pop-Up Literary Festival. So I'm joined with Heather Child, who is an author. Hi, Heather.
Hiya.
Thank you so much for joining us. Tell us a bit about the books that you've written, and I can see your borders in the background there, so I want to get to talking about that as well, because I've looked at that. It's quite a good piece of product that you've got around your books as well. So tell us all about your books and what your passion is.
So my first novel is Everything About You, which is about a woman who has a personal assistant like an Alexa or a Siri. Only it knows everything about her and can give her everything she wants. But what she most wants is to find her missing foster sister. So it's a bit kind of Black Mirror-y. Then my more recent novel is The Undoing of Arlo Knott, which is about a man who can mysteriously reverse his last actions, like having an undo button for life. So,
that would be a really, really neat trick.
I know, it's so tempting, right? We live online so much and you're just used to this world of reversibility. You can unfollow and unfriend people and undo anything with the touch of a button. I was just interested in whether it would help you in life or whether not being able to make mistakes would be, a real issue for you and you wouldn't grow and learn. And, that's what I wanted to explore with it.
Absolutely. I think it would be nice if we learned just as much from the joyous things, but we don't always do that. We tend to learn from our mistakes more. They seem to have a greater impact on us. What about your own writing journey? When did you decide that you wanted to write? Was it something that you did as a child or just kind of came to you?
It's something that I've always done, Becky, and by now it would feel strange to not be writing. It would feel more strange than to be writing. So it's something I've done since I was a small child, and it's the only job where you get to deal with the impossible. So that's what appeals to me.
And so do you have like a formula for writing? Like, are you a clear desk woman or you are better in clutter?
Clear desk would be lovely, but I am naturally quite messy, so it's a challenge.
And do you have kind of like a writing routine? So kind of like, are you better in the morning or the evening? How do you carve up your day for the best kind of creativity?
I found as I get older, I'm better in the mornings, but I always say to people, like, just write whenever you can, whenever you feel that burst of creative energy. And some people do it before breakfast, before their brain has really kicked in with all the mental to-do lists of the day and everything. It just depends on your routine, really.
It's interesting, isn't it? Some writers kind of like, we talk about this idea of, and it's funny living in Weston-super-Mare as I do, and I'm quite close to the beach. We talk about this idea of being locked away as a writer, writing your memoirs on the beach, and the house on the beach overlooking the sea. That was always my dream, kind of but probably more somewhere like California.
Not Western.
But there's this idea that we can write better in coffee shops or write better on a train. And I know that that's been true in my own life. And I looked into this and I found that we could tend to write well if we're in what's known as a liminal space. So not where you've been and not where you're going. So the beach, the sea would be, it's not on land and it's not in the ocean because your paper would get wet and your computer might fizzle. And that idea of in a coffee shop, you're also in a liminal space, you're not exactly where you're going. Is that something that works for you, or are you much better when you're in your home environment?
I personally don't write in coffee shops very much, but I know lots of writers do. And it's interesting what you're saying about the liminal space and that potentially being that sort of coastal area between sea and land. I think that does work, the liminal space idea for a lot of writers, and actually that physical space between sea and land, because some writers such as Will Self, I nearly said Will Smith, Will Self, they always go to beside a large body of water to finish their works. And there's maybe something about the water as well. I know that, humans being mainly made of water, some people say they feel this affinity if they're near water and they can write better there. So I suppose it just depends on how much you consider yourself to be in tune with kind of nature and needing to be around certain things, or maybe you're the kind of person that needs to be amid a coffee shop clutter, and you can get apps, can't you, that, or computer programs that recreate coffee shop noise, so that if you are at home, particularly during a pandemic, you can create that atmosphere for yourself and say, no, I'm nobody's seeing me, I'm anonymous in a coffee shop, or whatever you need.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds like a really clever app. I know that you can get ones for bird song and all sorts of things, but inside of a coffee shop, that sounds amazing. That is definitely something that's needed at this particular time. Within your own journey, did you ever have any limiting beliefs around your books or things kind of coming out? Because I know myself, I remember when I wrote the first book I ever wrote, it arrived in a jiffy bag, and I remember opening it and kind of going, oh, what's this? And then going, recognizing the cover, which I'd only seen on a screen, and realizing it was the first copy of my book. And I couldn't look at it. I cleaned the house from top to bottom. I was completely consumed with imposter syndrome. Did you have any experiences like that, or were you always able to flick your hair and go, because I know I'm an author? Or where were you? Where, you know, maybe not quite like that, but where were your feelings around that transition for you when your first book came out?
I mean, that would be great, wouldn't it, to flick the hair and just go, oh, yes, I knew this would happen. No, I think I had probably the usual kind of imposter syndrome of, but when my book first came out, it was such a whirlwind. I think I didn't process it for a long time. And also there is this kind of, there was so much publicity worked around this one in particular, because I was a debut novelist. So I was getting booked to go to lots of events, because of the publisher's orbits, I was going to Comic-Cons and, just suddenly being really busy. And I do still work part-time as well. So, I suppose I was just adapting to that and not really letting it sink in. But it's nice to it's nice to have books published, that's lovely.
I mean, it's an amazing journey, isn't it? And we know that, like a lot of people, to actually land a mainstream publishing contract is quite a big deal, because, it's quite hard to get past that sort of initial sort of push. Have you ever thought about self-publishing books, or that not been something on your radar?
I mean, it's not something I would rule out in the future. I know lots of people have mixed it up these days. They'll sometimes self-publish, they'll sometimes get a publishing deal with a publishing house. But you can self-publish and do really well. So yeah, I think it depends on what I was writing and what kind of, maybe if there wasn't such a mainstream market for it, it might be a good route to go down.
So with being a mainstream market for the book, and it's popular at Comic-Cons and things like that, do you feel that there's there's a assistance in niche marketing? So the fact that you know who your audience are, do you think that really helps support the book?
How do you mean, sorry?
So for example, we tend to sort of think, I've had conversations with authors, and you say, who's the book for? And they say, well, it's for everyone. And of course, that usually means it's not for anyone, because there is a certain readership, isn't there? There's like a certain audience that will like a particular comedian, or a certain audience that will like a particular TV show, or a certain audience, so it might be, you'd assume, let's think of a TV show, that the people that like Bridgerton would be the same people who like The Crown, or the same people who like, I don't know, I'm trying to kind of sort of think of any sort of period sort of drama. What's the other one in the really big house? I've never watched it, but
Downton Abbey. Yeah, I know what you mean.
So you would sort of assume, and I certainly know, I used to work in theatre, and one of the things that I suddenly saw happening with theatre was that there wasn't really new musicals being written, or maybe they were being written but they weren't being performed, because you would know, if we do an adaptation of something that's already popular, be that we do a musical about Queen, or a musical about ABBA, or we do an adaptation for The Wizard of Oz, and we turn that into Wicked, we know we've got an audience. So when you're an author and you're writing books, and I think that this kind of happened when we had the Twilight, Twilight became extremely popular, mainly because it was a self-published author, but one of the things that she did was she was part of very small writer community groups, and being part of the small writer community groups meant that she, say for example, there's 20,000 people that were part of that group, then she knew that there may be 3,000 people purchase, which is of course a book run. So when we think about that, then of course the erotic fiction 50 Shades of Grey was created off the back of the Vampire Chronicles, because the Grey was supposed to be the same kind of character as Edward Cullen. So I've gone off on one, but what I'm trying to say is that when you find a niche, a readership, a community of people who are into something like that, is it easier, do you feel, to kind of market a book because you really know who your audience is, rather than saying, I'm writing this book for everybody?
I mean, that's certainly true. And what, incidentally, what you're describing about the same kind of thing coming out, and it's the same reason that film studios in Hollywood are just producing sequel after sequel, and all of the last 10 years it's just been more and more Spider-Man.
Spider-Man 84, he's now
exactly, Spider-Man explores over-tourism or something. Yes, I mean, that's why there are imprints in publishing houses, I assume. Like, I'm with Orbit, which is traditionally kind of fantasy, sci-fi crossover. So this one, The Undoing of Arlo Knott, would be more a sort of crossover, speculative literary fiction. They also published the books by M.R. Carey, like The Girl with All the Gifts and stuff, which is more of a crossover type thing, and Claire North's books. The First 15 Lives of Harry August, for instance, which is kind of, it's sort of for a wider audience than just a fantasy or speculative fiction audience, but maybe a little bit more niche than, say, your Sally Rooney's. So you're absolutely right. And I think that the marketing is very carefully kind of arranged to reach the right audiences for a book.
And do you enjoy books in your own genre? What do you normally read?
I'll read everything, and I would have said previously kind of contemporary fiction mostly, but now I've noticed that I really like any kind of literary fiction with a speculative angle. And if something doesn't start, or something a little bit spooky, or just something, then I'm like, oh, this is so darn realistic. So I think I'm moving towards a certain preference, but I'll still read everything. How about yourself?
Yeah, for me, I think, I don't know, I'm very much down the non-fiction route. I think it's interesting to say that, isn't it? Because I was a massive Anne Rice fan. I think I really, really cut my learning to read as a teenager by reading Anne Rice. I just thought just all of the Vampire Chronicles, and then I went into the witching ones. But I like to expand my brain. And so if I'm going to sit with a book, I want to be learning something. So I think that's also why I became a personal development, but it's still under the guise of self-help author, because I'm fascinated by the human condition, and I like reading books like that. The only book that I have written that isn't like that was an erotic fiction book that was kind of like part memoir. Like, don't think you should do that, really, looking back. And I self-published that book under a completely different name so that I could go, never happened, if I regretted it down the line. But I think for me, I've certainly got into Audible probably during lockdown, mainly because our life is so on screens. I'm finding picking up a book, just my eyes are just like, no, I don't want to do this. So I found that sitting and just on an evening listening to a book actually feels like there's somebody in the room there with you. There's an intimacy of an audiobook. There's an audiobook I've been listening to recently. I won't name it, but it hasn't got enough pauses in it. And so he's headlining, and then sort of each chapter, he headlines what the chapter's called and then goes into this thing, and it's very monotonal. There's no personality in it. And I find I can only listen to that whilst walking. So I have to put headphones in, walk the dog, can listen to that. But sitting at home, I want to feel like I'm listening to a book and someone's actually telling me, you know, in actual fact, thinking about it, I think it might be really quite nice while we are more at home to listen to an actual fiction book, because of that intimacy of company that kind of perception really gives you. But yeah, I haven't sat with a paper book or a Kindle book for a while now, just because I'm so just eyes tired with screens. And I think that we're all kind of feeling like that, even having to do a literary festival in this way and not be, you know, have it as a pop-up kind of thing and not do it in person. And hopefully that will change as we move in throughout the year. But yeah, I think it's an interesting time for how we've connected to literature with lockdown. Do you think that your reading has changed? Have you read more or less since lockdown?
About the same. I just read before bed as usual. I know that some people have had great difficulty in concentrating on books and have just read almost nothing. And perhaps for some of the reasons you're saying as well. There's so much screen time. You know, I definitely get Zoom burnout, and the beauty of audiobooks, and that's why they're just booming at the minute, is because you can do something else at the same time, can't you? Walk the dog or do the housework or whatever.
Absolutely. And I've just really enjoyed that. And I've really enjoyed like listening to books. And also there's a new thing out. I don't know if you've heard of Clubhouse, but this is the new social media thing that's taking the world by storm. And it's a kind of an interesting thing, because you go into rooms and people are talking and you can put up your hand and join in the conversation. And so 1 minute you're listening to experts talking about something really quite interesting, and there's a lot of book groups that are kind of springing up, so helping authors on how to write, as well as helping authors on getting published, and book reading groups. And there's even a room where there's a guy that plays beautiful music for people in America to fall asleep to. It's called the Lullaby Room. So it's interesting how we consume information and how that changes. And I think how we're more getting prone towards things that are audible now than actually things that we're having to write and read. And it seems strange anyway that when we're looking at computers, we're looking at a screen. It still seems weird to me that we would read on a screen, you know, because it's a screen, it's a television. Why wouldn't it be more video? Why wouldn't it be more audio? So I think it's quite interesting how those things kind of pop up. So what's next for you? Are you working on something at the moment? My dog's next to me. Are you working on a new book at the moment? What are you working on? What's going on for you?
Yeah, I'm writing my third novel, which is about a bunch of private Caribbean islands that come together to form their own country. And it's about populist politics and narcissism. It's quite a way off. My agent has it at the minute. So yeah, but it's taken me quite a long time to do it. I think my concentration has taken a bit of a hit during the pandemic. Like, I've been lucky. I haven't, you know, kind of been short of time running around on the front lines or anything, but, you know, it's just been this, I think a lot of people have noticed this kind of amorphous anxiety kind of, that, you know, a lot of people have said to me, yeah, my concentration hasn't been great this year either.
Yeah, and I think it's also affect people's sleep and all sorts of different things. You know, you just need to go to a Caribbean island so that you can feel in the zone.
Exactly, that's
Yeah.
what I need. Research purposes, of course.
I've got to go. Paid for, you know. I'll take it out of my advance. Don't you worry. Sounds good. Well, thank you ever so much for joining us on World Book Day and telling us about your books and what you're up to. Really fascinating talking to you, and best of luck with your third book.
Thanks for having me, Becky.